everyone. So today we're actually not going to be baking. We're going to make one of my easy go-to recipes, and it's for salted cookie butter bark. So this is something you would eat as a dessert. I use this recipe. I send a lot of goodie boxes during the holidays, and this is something that everybody loves. So what I like to use, you'll need a cookie sheet or something about this size. I like to use parchment paper on the bottom. You could probably also use like wax paper or something like that, and just to keep it from sticking. You're gonna need 3 cups of chocolate chips. I usually just use like a 12-ounce bag, split it in half for the 2 different sections that we'll be making. You'll need about 2 tablespoons of melted butter. You will need 1 cup of confectioner's sugar. And you will need a cup of cookie butter. Couple different brands here. My favorite is the Trader Joe's Speculoos cookie butter. But if you're not near Trader Joe's, you can get the original Lotus Biscoff where you can get it. Amazon, Target, World Market, all those places. So you'll want a cup of that. 3 cups of chocolate chips. Like I said, a bag works well. You just use the whole bag. 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And again, this is what the confectioner's sugar looks like. It's also called powdered sugar. It's usually 10x sugar. And if you have it, I would get some flaky salt. I like to use the Maldon sea salt flakes. I'll show you what those look like. All right. And just to talk a little bit about, and also I like to use a little bit of coconut oil. You can either use it in solid format, you can use vegetable oil. You'll only need about maybe 1 to 2 tablespoons, and that's to help melt the chocolate. So let's talk about some of the different combinations you could use here. So with the chocolate chips, you can use Ghirardelli melting wafers. You could probably use bars of chocolate. I have also used, if you're vegan or dairy free, Ghirardelli makes a really great non-dairy chocolate chip that I've used, just 1-for-1 ratio. Butter, you can use non-dairy butter or the butter of your choosing. You just need 2 tablespoons of that, and that's to go in with the powdered sugar. Biscoff cookie butter, if you don't have that available, granted it's not going to taste the same, but you could also use like a regular smooth Jif peanut butter. Or Peter Pan or whatever it is you use, but the smooth kind, like the original kind. I would not recommend using any like natural peanut butters or anything like that, because the recipe really feeds off the sugars that are already in these. If you do make it with peanut butter, it's probably going to taste more like a Buckeye, you know, the little peanut butter balls dipped in chocolate that come out of the state of Ohio. So just some alternatives for you. Powdered sugar is powdered sugar. I've never used anything else, no reason to. And like I said, if you don't have Maldon sea salt, you could probably just use like maybe a little bit coarser of a salt, just to give it some texture on top, but it really adds, the saltiness really adds to the sweetness. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna take my oil, and like I said, you could use vegetable oil, you can use canola oil. I just use melted MCT coconut oil because it's easiest. You put about a tablespoon, and we're gonna throw it in the microwave. I would recommend this is 1.5 cups of the chocolate chips. I would recommend putting that in at 30-second intervals and checking it. I just happen to know that our microwave needs about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes to melt those chocolate chips. And let me grab my rubber spatula. I actually like to use this when it comes to getting things out of the bowl, and also getting the chocolate out of the bowl onto the platter here, onto the tray. Now when it comes to so this is our first step, is melting the chocolate and putting it on our tray. We're gonna throw that in the freezer while we start the next step. And what we just wanna do is we want the chocolate to harden up at that point. As something else to consider, I am gonna use my KitchenAid mixer that is over here in the corner, but you do not need that for this recipe. You can literally, in step 2, when we mix the cookie butter, the confectioner's sugar, and the butter, you can mix it by hand and it's just fine. But just wanna provide that option if you do have a mixer, if you do have a like a mixer with the detached pieces. And so you'll see that the chocolate, it's about halfway melted. Now you definitely don't want to overcook this because then it's going to smell burnt and it's going to taste gross. So again, it probably needs about another 30 seconds. I really prefer the smaller chocolate chips because they are easier when it comes to melting. It just provides a better consistency. So once those come out, we'll get them on the sheet and we'll get started with the rest of the recipe. So let's see, let's take a look here. Oh yeah, this is coming along really nice. Yep. So 1.5 minutes did it for the mini chocolate chips in my microwave. And you can see it's pretty smooth. There's a few lumps, but you can kind of stir those out. So next thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna pour these into our pan here. So I just actually like to take the spatula and just get all the chocolate out without trying to figure out where I want it to go. And we're actually just gonna set that aside for our second round of chocolate. And what you're just gonna start doing is, I try to make kind of feels like I'm a kid with paint actually, if you wanna know the truth. I try to make a rough rectangle with rounded edges. So it's kind of like you're painting with chocolate. I don't know. That's what it feels like for me, and I love this part. So you just kind of make whatever shape you want. I'm gonna turn it around, and I'll show you the finished product here. It doesn't need to be pretty because this layer, nobody's gonna see it anyway. It's gonna be on the bottom. And I will post the original recipe down in the bottom. It's something I discovered a few years ago, like I said, and it's just something really easy that all my friends love and request. And when it comes time for the holiday boxes, they're like, can we have your cookie butter bark? I actually feel guilty with them loving it so much because it's so easy to make, but I also don't want to give them the recipe. But I'll share it with all of you. All right. So we're going to set the spatula aside. This is what our chocolate looks like. And now we're going to throw this in the freezer. And all we really want is for that to set up while we make our cookie butter mix. So for our cookie butter mix, we're going to take our 1 cup of confectioner's sugar. And like I said before, that you can use, whatever kind of mixing device you have is fine. It all works. It's just really easy for me to do it this way because I have it. And so you'll need a cup of cookie butter. I love Trader Joe's stuff. And also it's just super easy to recycle the glass. So usually when I get all the cookie butter out of it, and you'll learn that when it comes to this recipe, I don't measure. I kind of eyeball it, which I probably should measure. Except for the confectioner's sugar. I absolutely did measure that. But so we'll get this jar as clean as we can. We have about 1/3 of a cup in there, so good thing I have a second jar of cookie butter. Now, usually if you have a jar, you can get about 2 batches of the cookie butter out of it. All right. So we are all done with the cookie butter, and now we're going to take our melted butter and we're going to pour it in. the mixer down, put it on the lowest setting for just a couple minutes. The butter really helps make everything a little bit smoother. And we're gonna go ahead and prep the next bowl of melted chocolate. All right, so let's take a look and see what that looks like. Well, that smells delicious. All right, just a second and we will be right back. All right, so while we're waiting on the original layer of chocolate to set up in the freezer, I just checked it and it's not ready yet. I'm going to go ahead and heat the chocolate in the microwave. Again, I know it's for 1 minute and 30 seconds. Right, that cookie butter is looking great. Let's get it out of that bowl. The thing I love about this recipe is that it comes so clean out of the bowl, so I moved this so that way you could see it. But you'll see it's very, it's soft, but it's well blended. So what we'll do is we're gonna put that in the fridge for just a couple minutes to let it set up. And I'm gonna put the pause on the chocolate. So we've got a few minutes to just kind of wait for our chocolate to set up, for our Biscoff cookie butter mixture to set up, and we're just gonna let the chocolate rest for a second. But while we're here, you know, I mentioned in the previous video that from time to time you'll hear about topics that are on my mind, and sometimes they're well thought out and sometimes they're not. But today I just want to talk about shame. You know, shame is something that I have dealt with my entire life, but it wasn't until maybe the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years that I actually had a word for it. And it was after reading lots of Brene Brown, you know, Daring Greatly. What was the other one that she did? I Thought It Was Just Me. And if you haven't read those books, they're amazing. My new favorite is Atlas of the Heart. But it may be, I think partly it's being a female, and I think partly it has to do with my personality type. I do identify with the Enneagram 2, if you're familiar with that. And again, not all personality profiles mean everything, but I kind of take what I leave and leave the rest. So and for a lot of my life, like I just thought there was something wrong with me, you know, and I felt very shameful. Like, it's not that I did something wrong, but that in some way I was wrong. So like I existed incorrectly, like everything I did was wrong. It was pervasive. And, you know, it was only in recent years that I learned the concept of like, I am wrong versus I did something wrong. And now I'm at the stage where, you know, it's been really interesting lately. There are things I don't even have shame about, and I just naturally look for ways to feel shameful, which sounds really awful. I'm not judging that, but just when you say it out loud, like you're looking for reasons to shame yourself. It's kind of what is at the top of my mind lately, and I'm just working through how to stop doing that. Like, because at the root of it, you think that you should always feel shameful. I'm saying me and where I am at this point in my life, and that's just not a belief I'm willing to accept about myself anymore. So I think, and something happened the other day that kind of brought this to the surface. So I was doing something and I immediately was like, oh my gosh, like I feel so bad about that. And I caught myself and I was like, why do I even feel bad about that? I didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't anything that I did. It was almost like left over from childhood. I thought that I always needed to feel shame. And so I was looking for something to fit in that box so that way I can make myself feel shameful. And so what I've really been trying to do lately is just catching myself in the moment and just being like, wait, you don't even have anything that you should feel shameful about. You're just making things up because it's what you're used to, and picking the path of just saying no to that. Yeah, so if anybody can relate, let me know. Like I said, it's just, you know, things come up from time to time, and that's what I am mentally just considering and working through right now. Like, because I know, you know, and from my childhood, I always joke that like, when you felt like you were at rock bottom emotionally or mentally, there's only one way to go up from there, right? So it's like, I'll always pick the positive path because I've been everywhere else and I know what that feels like. But you know what I don't know about? I don't know a lot about happiness or joy. And it always seemed to be something that was, you know, just right out of my grasp. And so I'm exploring how to get there by not shaming myself all the time. Speaking of something that I'm not going to feel shameful for, it is digging into this cookie butter. So let's take a look at this chocolate. Yeah, so this is what you want. You can tell that it started to pull the edges of the parchment up a little bit. That means it's dry and it's ready for the next step. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our cookie butter mixture from the fridge. I would probably leave it in there for about maybe, I would either put it in the fridge or the freezer. If you put it in the fridge, you could wrap it with saran wrap and just leave it in there for the day. It might get a little crumbly in texture, which is totally okay if it's crumbly. Or what I have right now, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it looks like a ball of peanut butter. And that's actually what it feels like too. So we're just going to, when it's a bit more crumbly, it's probably a little easy to spread around. But this way I'm just gonna break off a piece, maybe like a fifth of it. And I'm just gonna put it on the chocolate. And I'm gonna start mashing it out so it is a little flat. You want a really thin layer. I'm talking maybe 1/4 of an inch, if that. And you wanna take it almost to the edge of the chocolate. Once I get this next piece spread around, I will lift this up so you can see. And actually, this is spreading really nicely. So like I said, you really want to take it to maybe like, I don't know, I would say 1/2 inch from the edge of the chocolate. And this is really pliable and easy to move around. So I'm going to show you what I'll just leave the other piece there, but this is what it looks like. We're slowly working our way down. And so, like I said, we're just gonna get that about 1/4 inch from the edge. You want it maybe 1/4 inch thick. And you'll notice the warmer it gets, the easier it sticks to your hands. So I would just keep moving it around as quick as you can. You may notice you have a little more, a little less left over, so just make sure to kind of spread it out equally. Like I said, about 1/4 of an inch. You can see what it looks like. And so now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get that melted chocolate out. We're gonna finish melting it, and then we're going to pour it on top. And so what we'll do is once we put the chocolate on top, then we're actually gonna put the maldon sea salt on it and throw it back in the freezer. I would let it sit up for maybe 2-3 hours in the freezer, and then you can just break it apart. So for example, for this size piece, I would think you'd probably get, I don't know, maybe 16 to 20 pieces. And you're just gonna I would probably start like 1/3 of the way in with both fingers, press down, and just see how many pieces you get from that. Hopefully it's a pretty clean break. Yeah, and hopefully it's a clean break and you'll be able to just I usually break it up, like I kind of think about it with like 12 to 16 pieces, so almost like a grid if I can. Sometimes it doesn't always work that way and you actually just have to kind of go with it. So again, we melted the chocolate however long we did for before. We used the same chocolate bowl, so we only have one dish, and a silicone spatula works really well for getting all the last little bits of chocolate, so that way it is then easier to clean. I would actually recommend just putting some dish soap in the bottom and some water filling it to the top, and that will really help break up that chocolate for when it's time to wash it, whether you do it or the dishwasher does it. So you'll notice that the chocolate, I did the same thing. I just kind of put it in a pile, and now we're going to spread this out over the top of the cookie butter layer. Something you want to be careful of is you don't want it to be too thick. You want it to go to the edge, maybe even peel a little bit back from the edge, just so that way people can see the natural layers of the cookie butter. But you're going to spread it around. This should be enough chocolate to cover it all. Again, except for, like I said, save maybe some edges of the cookie butter. So we're going to pull this chocolate down so it's pretty thin across the top. This was just the right combination of volume of chocolate. So funny, it can melt differently during different times of the year, but right now it's in the 50s and 60s here, so it's pretty cold outside. It's not very humid. All right. So again, I'll drop the recipe in the notes and go give that recipe creator some love, because this was the only recipe that I've ever found like this, and I have friends that absolutely love it. You can either choose to lick the spatula, or I'm just going to put it in that bowl in the sink. So you'll see now we have this, and the nice thing is about the parchment is when you're done with it, you can just throw it away and your pan really isn't that dirty because you used your parchment paper. And so this is where you're going to take your maldon sea salt. And the recipe calls for about 1/4 teaspoon, I think, or maybe a teaspoon. I might use less than that. Just grab whatever you can get with your fingers, and you don't want a lot. Like, I think it actually might be closer to 1/2 teaspoon. Yeah, over time I learned that like a teaspoon for me was too much. But so if you can see it up close, you can see the little flecks of maldon sea salt. And now what we do is I'm gonna throw this in the freezer for about 2 hours. And like I said, after that, feel free to break it apart into smaller pieces. To store it, I store it in the freezer. It's probably okay in the fridge, but in the freezer, it's just the right consistency. And so sometimes I'll make this for my husband, and it'll just be a nice treat for him when he brings it out of the freezer. He can just have it whenever he wants to. If you're gonna send it to somebody, what I would recommend is sending it with something that's frozen. So I bake a lot of breads, I freeze them, and then I put this on top. I put it in a Ziploc bag, and if you're gonna layer it, I put it in a Ziploc bag, and then I take the same paper that I use down here, this parchment paper sheet. I got mine on Amazon, but you can get them anywhere, just because I use so much. And you can put that in between the layers of the salted cookie butter bark, and just zip it in a Ziploc bag, and I lay that on top, and it's usually pretty well protected from getting crushed. It stays frozen. I've never had any complaints about it getting shipped. You could put it in a tin, in a box, anything like that. But I would just make sure that you have it wrapped in some kind of plastic wrap, so that way if you're in a climate where it could melt or where it's humid or it's during the summer, that you don't have to worry about that. And just always put it in some kind of zippy bag. I think that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoy the salted cookie butter bark, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much for the conversation. Bye.